Have you ever really thought about how you feel the world? I mean, how you can feel the difference between silk and sandpaper, or pull your hand away from a hot stove before you even consciously think, ouch. It's all thanks to this incredible high-speed network of signals, a biological information superhighway running from your skin all the way to your brain in a flash. So, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the tiny detectives living in our skin. Then we'll see how they send their messages up the body's superhighways. We're going to trace two totally different routes, one for touch and one for pain. And you're definitely going to want to stick around for the end because that's when we see what happens in the real world when these highways get damaged. All right, so every single thing we feel, from a gentle breeze to a sharp poke, it's all got to start somewhere, right? Well, that starting point is this massive network of millions of microscopic detectors buried right under the surface of our skin. And that's really the big question, isn't it? How does the physical world, pressure, heat, vibrations, get turned into a language that our brain can actually understand and, feel? It all begins right here. If you were to look at a cross-section of your skin, you'd see it is just packed with different kinds of tactile receptors. The best way to think about them is like a team of super specialized detectives. Each one is on the lookout for a very specific type of clue from the outside world. And what kind of clues are they looking for? Well, the big ones are things like simple touch or pressure, that buzzing feeling of vibration, changes in temperature, both hot and cold, and of course, that really important alarm signal, pain. Now, this team of detectives isn't just spread out randomly. Just look at our hands. Something like 40% of the receptors are these things called Meissner's corpuscles, which are perfect for feeling a light touch, like when you're scrolling on your phone. Another 25% are Merkel's discs, which sense the steady pressure of you holding that phone. It's this specific, dense mix of detectors that makes our fingertips so unbelievably good at exploring the world.
Okay, so once one of those detectives in your skin finds a clue, that signal needs to go somewhere. It basically hops onto a biological superhighway, kicking off this high-speed race all the way to your brain.
These highways are made of what we call primary sensory nerve fibers. You can just picture them as biological cables. But here's the cool part. Not all cables are the same. Just like a real highway has a fast lane and a slow lane, these nerve fibers have different speeds, and it all comes down to how thick they are. And this table just shows you how wild the difference is. Look at this. The signal for proprioception, that's just your brain's sense of where your body is, like your posture. It travels on a thick A-alpha fiber at a blistering 100 meters per second. That speed is absolutely critical for you to, say, not fall over. But then look at the signal for a dull, throbbing pain. That travels on a skinny little C fiber at less than 2 meters per second. It's a massive, massive difference, and it's exactly why you feel the impact of stubbing your toe instantly, but that dull ache takes a second or two to really kick in. All right, so let's follow a specific signal. Let's say it's the feeling of fine touch from your fingertip. This kind of super detailed info travels along a very specific route, a VIP highway, called the dorsal column pathway. You should think of this pathway as the high-fidelity 4K channel. It carries the really detailed stuff. That's the discriminative touch that lets you tell the difference between a nickel and a dime in your pocket just by feel. It also carries vibration and that all-important proprioceptive data, your unconscious sense of where your arms and legs are. So this journey happens in a 3-neuron relay race. The first neuron grabs a signal, enters the spinal cord, and just shoots straight up to the brainstem, all on the same side of the body. Only then does it hand off the baton to the second neuron, and that's the one that finally crosses over to the opposite side. From there, the third neuron finishes the race, taking the signal up to the part of your brain that actually feels it. And you can see that path right here. It's like an express lane that goes straight up one side of the spinal cord, and the crossover doesn't happen until way, way up high in the brainstem. Now burn that image into your mind, because the next highway we're going to look at is completely different. Okay, time to switch gears completely. What about a different signal, like that sharp feeling of pain or a sudden splash of cold water? That info doesn't take the express lane. It travels on a totally separate highway called the spinothalamic tract. The information on this highway is less about fine detail and more about urgent alerts. We're talking pain, hot, and cold sensations, and what we call crude touch. That's the kind where you know you've been touched, but you can't tell if it was with a finger or a pen. And look at the huge difference in this relay race. The first neuron enters the spinal cord, and instead of shooting up, it immediately hands off the signal to the second neuron.
And that second neuron crosses over to the opposite side right away at the exact same level it came in before it starts its long trip up to the brain. The contrast here is it's stark. Unlike that touch pathway, these pain and temperature signals cross the highway almost the second they get on the on-ramp. Their entire journey up to the brain happens on the opposite side of the body from where the feeling actually started. So, let's put them side by side. You've got the dorsal column for fine touch, which crosses way up high in the brainstem, and you've got the spinothalamic tract for pain, which crosses way down low, right inside the spinal cord. Two totally different kinds of information taking two completely separate routes to get to the same destination. So, who cares? Why is this whole separation thing so important? Well, because this isn't just a biology lesson. It has some really profound real-world consequences when this wiring gets messed up. I mean, this is a critical question for doctors. If someone has a spinal cord injury, knowing exactly how these highways are laid out is the absolute key to figuring out not only what's gone wrong, but where.
So for example, if that dorsal column gets damaged, our touch and position pathway, a person can develop something called sensory ataxia. Their brain is literally being starved of that positional information, that proprioception. It just doesn't know where its own limbs are in space, and that leads to a really serious loss of coordination and balance. And there's a classic way to test for this. If a patient stands with their eyes open, they can use their vision to make up for that lost sense of position, and they can stand pretty steady. But the second they close their eyes, that visual help is gone. They have to rely on that broken dorsal column, and they start to sway, sometimes severely. It's a really powerful clue for doctors.
And this brings us to the big finale, the really crucial takeaway. Because those highways cross over at different spots, an injury to just one side of the spinal cord creates this really strange but very specific pattern of symptoms. A person will lose fine touch on the same side as the injury because that signal hadn't crossed over yet. But they'll lose pain and temperature sensation on the opposite side of their body because that signal crossed over way down low long before it even reached the site of the injury. For a neurologist, this pattern is like a treasure map that points exactly to where the problem is. So think about that. The next time you stub your toe, and we all will, just for a second, try to notice the difference. That immediate, sharp, localized ow is one highway, and that duller feeling of pressure, of knowing exactly how your toe is bent, that's a completely different highway. In every single thing you feel, you are experiencing two beautiful, complex, and totally separate superhighways at work.